My fiancée demanded I gift 10% of my company to her parents as a wedding present. When I refused, she lied, telling them I already agreed. But what I did next left them speechless. I'm 33 years old. I founded my own tech consulting company from scratch when I was 26. And what happened a few months ago, with my now ex-fiancée, basically taught me that no matter how much you love someone, there are lines you simply can't cross. And when I say lines, I mean they literally asked me to give away part of my company, like my baby. What I built with my own hands during 7 years of not sleeping and almost dying from stress, as if it were a fucking wedding toaster. But let me start from the beginning because this story is crazier than it seems. I met Victoria about 2.5 years ago at a networking event, one of those boring ones where everyone pretends to care about what you do while looking for business opportunities. She worked in marketing for a big firm, came from a family with money, like a lot of money, and at first that didn't matter to me at all because, honestly, I was doing pretty well financially thanks to my company. I wasn't a millionaire or anything like that, but I was doing well, you know? I had built this tech consulting company from literally nothing. I started alone in my mom's apartment after quitting a corporate job I hated. And by the time I met Victoria, we already had like 15 employees and contracts with pretty big companies. It was my pride. My entire life summed up in that company. Victoria was amazing at first, or at least that's what I thought. Beautiful, smart, ambitious, and she seemed to understand how important my business was to me. We dated for a year before I proposed, and when I did, I thought it was the right decision. My friends loved her, my family accepted her well, although my mom always said there was something about Victoria that didn't quite convince her, but I attributed it to moms always being like that with their sons' girlfriends, right? Like, no one is ever good enough for their baby. We got engaged in March last year, planned the wedding for December, everything seemed perfect. It was one of those moments where you think, okay, I finally have my life in order, I have my company, I have my girl, everything's going well. But then September came, like 3 months before the wedding, and Victoria came to my house one day with this weird smile, like nervous but excited at the same time. I was in the kitchen making coffee because I'd had a horrible meeting with a client and urgently needed caffeine, and she sat on the island stool and said, "Hey honey, I need to ask you something important." And I, idiot me, thought it was going to be something about the wedding, like if we could change the menu or invite more people from her side or something like that. I turned around with my coffee cup and told her, "Sure, love, tell me." And she dropped the bomb. She said, "I've been thinking about what to give my parents for the wedding. You know, something special because they've been so generous with us. And I think it would be beautiful if you gave them a stake in your company." I stood there, literally with the cup halfway to my mouth, processing what I had just heard. At first, I thought I had misunderstood, like my brain was so fried from work that I had misinterpreted her words. I told her, "Wait, what? You want me to give away shares of my company?" And she nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world, like I was asking her to buy flowers or something. She said, "Yes, like 5 or 10%, nothing major, just something symbolic to show them we value them and that we're a family now." And I laughed. Because honestly, I thought she was joking, but she didn't laugh with me. She just sat there looking at me with that serious expression, and I realized, shit, she's serious about this. I explained to her, and I think I was pretty clear, although I tried not to sound condescending, that company shares aren't casual gifts, that this meant giving her parents a voice and vote in my business decisions, that they would technically become my partners even though they'd never put a dime into building this. I told her, "Victoria, this company is what I've built from scratch. I literally mortgaged my life for this for years. I worked 18 hours a day. I lost relationships. I sacrificed everything. I can't just give away pieces of it like they're souvenirs." She frowned and said I was being dramatic, that it was just a gesture, that her parents wouldn't even interfere with anything. And I responded, "Then if they're not going to interfere with anything, why do they want shares? Wouldn't it be better to literally give them anything else? A trip, jewelry, whatever?" She got angry and said, I didn't understand the value of the family gesture, and I told her that of course I understood family gestures, but this wasn't a gesture. It was basically giving away my financial and professional future. The conversation ended badly. She left upset, and I stayed there in my kitchen thinking, what just happened? I called Ryan, my best friend since college, and told him everything. Ryan is one of those friends who tells you the truth, even if it hurts. And after listening to me, he said, dude, that's a giant red flag. Nobody in their right mind would ask for that. I told him that maybe Victoria was just trying to impress her parents, that she came from a family where big gestures were important. But Ryan told me, Daniel, listen to yourself. You're justifying something that's completely out of line. He was right, but I wanted to believe we could work it out, that it was just a misunderstanding. About 2 weeks passed and Victoria didn't mention the topic again, so I thought she had let it go. We were busy with wedding preparations anyway. I had a big project at the company, and honestly, I wanted to forget that whole awkward conversation. But then one afternoon, I'm in a meeting with my team when I get a call from a number I don't recognize. Normally, I don't answer calls from unknown numbers during work, but something told me to answer. It was Victoria's mother, Mrs. Morrison, and she was super excited on the phone. She said, Daniel, dear, I just spoke with Victoria, and you don't know how touched my husband and I are by your generous gift. It's so thoughtful of you to include us in your success. We're so proud to have you as a son-in-law. My heart sank to the floor. I literally felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I told her, excuse me, Mrs. Morrison, I think there's a misunderstanding. I haven't agreed to give away any part of my company, and there was a horrible silence on the other end of the line. She said, but Victoria told me you had already talked and that you were preparing the papers. I, trying to stay calm although inside I was boiling, explained that Victoria had mentioned the idea, but that I had been very clear that it wasn't possible, that there must have been some confusion. Mrs. Morrison got cold immediately. Her tone completely changed, and she said, I see. I'll talk to my daughter then, and hung up. I called Victoria immediately. Didn't even wait for the meeting to finish. I left the boardroom and called her like 15 times until she answered. I told her, what the fuck did you do? Why did you tell your mom that I had agreed to give shares of my company? And she, with a super calm voice that made me even more furious, said she was sure I was going to change my mind, that she just wanted to make her parents happy, and thought that if they already knew, I wouldn't want to look bad by backing out. I mean, can you believe that logic? She had basically manipulated me, trying to make me feel socially obligated to give away my company. I yelled at her. And I don't usually yell, but I was really angry that this was a lie, that she had crossed a huge line, and that she needed to call her parents immediately and tell them the truth. That night, Victoria came to my house. I thought she was going to apologize, but instead she gave me an ultimatum. She stood in my living room, and I swear she looked like a completely different person from the one I knew. She said, Daniel, this is very simple. Either you give my parents the shares and show that you really care about this family, or we cancel the wedding. Just like that. No beating around the bush. I sat there on my couch, looking at her like she was a stranger, because in that moment I realized that maybe she had always been like this, and I had been too blind to see it. I asked her, are you blackmailing me? Is that your plan? Threaten to cancel our wedding if you don't get your way? And she said, it's not blackmail, it's priorities. If you can't make this sacrifice for me and my family, then clearly your company is more important than our marriage. I didn't sleep that night. Literally nothing. I stayed awake in my bed thinking about everything, replaying our relationship in my head, looking for signs I had ignored. And there were some, of course there were, small things that hadn't seemed important at the time but now made sense. The way she always expected me to pay for everything, even though she made good money. How she assumed my money was our money, but her money was her money. The way she talked about my company as if it were a shared resource instead of my work. The next day I called Jessica, my lawyer and friend for years, and told her the whole situation. Jessica listened to me in silence while I explained everything, from the initial request to Victoria's ultimatum. When I finished, she sighed and said, Daniel, speaking as your lawyer, if you give Victoria's parents shares, you'd be committing possibly the biggest financial and legal mistake of your life. She explained that once someone has a stake in your company, they have legal rights. They can demand financial information. They can object to important decisions. They basically become your partners even though they haven't contributed anything, she said. And speaking as your friend, anyone who asks you for this either doesn't understand anything about business or is deliberately using you. And from what you tell me about Victoria, she definitely understands what she's doing. I talked to Victoria again 2 days later. I told her my answer was no, definitely no, and that if she really loved me, she would understand why this wasn't negotiable. Victoria got hysterical, literally started crying and screaming that I was selfish, that I only cared about money, that her family had been so good to me and I was rejecting them. I told her, Victoria, your family has been kind, yes, but that doesn't mean I owe them part of my company, and the fact that you think I do tells me we're not on the same page about anything. She said, then it's over. I'm not going to marry someone so stingy who can't make a simple gesture for the people I love. And I, even though it hurt in my chest and I felt like something was being ripped away from me, told her, okay, if that's what you want, then it's over. I thought that was the end of it. That Victoria would leave, that we'd process the breakup like adults and everyone would go their separate ways. But no, oh no, things got worse. Turns out Victoria started a complete campaign with our mutual friends, telling them her version of the story where I was the villain. She told them I had promised to include her parents in my business, that it was an important family tradition, and that at the last minute I had backed out because of greed. I started getting messages from friends asking what had happened, some even telling me I had crossed the line. How could I be so insensitive? Sarah, a mutual friend who had always been pretty neutral, called me one night and said, Daniel, I need to hear your side, because what Victoria is saying doesn't sound like you. I told her everything, absolutely everything, without omitting details. I explained how Victoria had lied to her parents, how she had given me an ultimatum, how she had tried to manipulate me socially. Sarah was quiet for a moment, and then said, okay, you need to tell the others this because Victoria is making you look like a monster. And she was right. I needed to defend myself. But I didn't want to get into a he said, she said game, so I did something better. I had the text messages where Victoria admitted she had lied to her parents. I had emails where we discussed the topic. I had evidence of everything. I made a document, basically a timeline of events with screenshots and everything, and shared it with close friends who had asked me. I told them, look, I don't want to badmouth Victoria, but this is the complete truth. You can judge for yourselves. The reaction was immediate. Most apologized to me. Some said they couldn't believe Victoria had lied like that. And basically the friend group split. But at least it wasn't me against everyone anymore. Then came the calls from Victoria's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison. First the dad called, Mr. Morrison, with that condescending tone that rich guys have who think everyone should bow down to them. He told me he was disappointed in me, that he had expected more from someone who was going to be part of his family, that my lack of generosity was concerning. I tried to explain my point, but he interrupted me saying that clearly I didn't understand how real families worked, that they had raised Victoria to expect certain standards. And I, already tired of all this, told him, Mr. Morrison, with all due respect, your daughter lied to me and manipulated me, and if those are the standards you taught her, then I'm glad not to be part of your family. I hung up and blocked him. The mom tried later, with a different strategy, like more emotional. She called crying, saying she couldn't believe I was going to break her daughter's heart like this, that Victoria loved me so much, that they had placed so much trust in me. I told her, Mrs. Morrison, your daughter doesn't love me. She sees me as a resource, and you supported her in that, so please don't call me anymore. I also blocked her number. I blocked all their numbers because honestly, I was fed up with drama. I had a company to run and a future to rebuild without Victoria in it. But Victoria didn't give up, because of course not. Like 3 weeks after the breakup, she showed up at my office. The receptionist called me saying Victoria was downstairs and if I'd let her come up. For a second, I thought about saying no, but I also wanted to close this chapter definitively, so I told her to come up. She came into my office looking terrible, like no makeup, red eyes, and sat in front of my desk. She started apologizing, saying she had made a terrible mistake, that she was under a lot of pressure from her parents, that she really loved me, and that we could fix this. She said she didn't need to give her parents shares, that we could just get married and forget all this. I looked at her, and honestly, I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not love, not sadness, nothing. It was like looking at a stranger, I told her. Victoria, even if we forgot about the shares, how do I trust you after you lied so blatantly? How do I build a marriage with someone who manipulates me and gives me ultimatums? She started crying harder, saying she had changed, that she had learned her lesson, that please give her another chance. I told her no, that I'm sorry, but there was no going back, that she needed to find someone who would love her the way she wanted to be loved. But that person wasn't me. Victoria left my office crying, and honestly, I thought that was the definitive end. I changed my phone number, blocked her on all social media, basically cut off all possible contact. Some friends told me I was too harsh, that maybe I should have given her another chance. But Ryan, my lifelong friend, told me something that stuck with me. He said, "Dude, your company isn't just money, it's your identity, your future, your security. Someone who asks you to give that away doesn't see you as a partner, they see you as a means to an end." And he was absolutely right. Now, like 6 months after all this, I'm fine. My company is growing. We literally just signed 2 big new contracts. I hired 3 more employees, and I'm completely focused on that. Do I miss having a partner? Sometimes, yes. I'm not going to lie. But what I don't miss is the drama, the manipulation, the feeling of being used. My mom told me recently, sometimes blessings come disguised as losses, and I think she's right. If I had married Victoria, I'd probably be in a miserable marriage fighting to maintain control of my own company. Do I regret anything? Maybe not seeing the signs earlier, investing so much time in someone who clearly didn't share my values. But I don't regret defending what I built, saying no when it was necessary. Some of the friends who sided with Victoria eventually came back to talk to me and told me they had heard. She tried the same thing with another guy she met after me, like she started asking him for expensive things within a few weeks of dating. I guess there are people who just function like that. They look for what they can get from others instead of building something genuine. Last week, I was at a dinner with Ryan and Jessica, celebrating the company's anniversary, and Ryan raised his glass and said, to Daniel, who had the balls to say no when it mattered. And I toasted, thinking, yeah, honestly, it was hard. It was horrible while it was happening. But it was worth it. My company is still mine. My future is in my hands. And although the path to the altar completely derailed, at least I know I didn't sell myself or my work in the process. And that, I guess, is enough for now.